Welcome to Peace in the Valley, where adventure starts at home.
Good evening. Tonight, this is a Friday evening, that's why I say tonight. I am going to show you guys how I make one of my favorite bread recipes ever. I know everybody has their own form of therapy. Mine is bread, sweet breads, yeast breads, quick anything bread. So this is a recipe that I've been using since 2008, and I got it from Bryce's sister, Lisa. Thank you very much, Lisa. It is a focaccia bread recipe, and this is just the plain recipe. There's all kinds of variations out there. There's condensed versions that are very quick. This is a traditional recipe, and it takes approximately 3 hours total from where we're starting right now until we pull bread out of the oven. So I'm going to get started and tell you about the ingredients. It's like 4 ingredients. It's so simple. Use about 7 cups of bread flour. You can also use unbleached all-purpose flour. It works just fine as well. I am going to use bread flour because that's what I have. 3.5 cups of warm water. That's what I'm just getting ready to get out of the microwave, see if it's the right temperature. The recipe says 110 degrees, but it will work just fine with anywhere from 105 to 115. So we're going to see where we're at with this one. I put this in, this is a Pampered Chef mixing bowl, and I put it in the 3.5 cups in for 1.5 minutes. So we're going to see where we get for 1.5 minutes. We might have to go more. Oh, 95. What I'm going to do is I'm going to stick it back in there for about 15 more seconds or so. The warm water mixed with the yeast, which you're going to use 1 teaspoon of active yeast. I've got mine in an old peanut butter jar. I get the bricks from wherever you buy your stuff. And I think I need to remeasure because I think I did 2 teaspoons. A lot of times I make a double batch because I've got 2 of the pans. But I'm just making 1 batch tonight because I'm tired. And that's a lot of stuff to fold later. Hopefully I didn't get it too hot. Too hot and you can kill your yeast. Not hot enough and your yeast won't go. Won't do its job. A lot of times I feel it with the back of my pinky finger, because that's your most sensitive finger. If you use your index finger, it's not very sensitive because you use it the most. So you use a finger that you don't normally use, and then you can usually feel. And it feels like I'd take a bath in that. So we're pretty close, so we're going to go ahead and say it's good. So I usually dump my yeast in first, 1 teaspoon of active dry yeast. And then I put my water on top of it, because then I don't really have to mix it anymore. This is my favorite mixing spoon in the entire world, right here. I use this for all my bread. Pampered Chef is amazing. It's good. I've got a lot of theirs, but it is a good wooden spoon. So after you put the water and the yeast in, then the directions say you are going to whisk the flour, water, and yeast together. So the flour, it's a lot of flour. When I was starting to collect my stuff this afternoon to make this tonight, I realized I don't have enough flour because you use about 7 cups. So we're going to start with this thing right here, because this is what I have. And I try to be careful with, I don't do the whole thing where you get a knife and you level it off. I just kind of shake it. Is that the right way? I don't know. Works for me though, so I haven't had any complaints about my bread yet. save that for later because I can't scrape it all out. I try to keep my flour in clumps so that way if I lose count, which I do a lot, I can see I got 1, 2, 3 in there, so now I got 4. 5. 6. And 7. And then as I'm mixing this, the directions say that you can use an electric mixer to do this. I really like the therapy of just stirring it. So you whisk it together. That's all it says. So just make sure everything is incorporated, the flour, and you're going to have this really thick, pasty, spongy type of a mixture when you're done. And while I'm doing that, I'll go ahead and tell you about the other 2 ingredients that you're going to need for this recipe. You're going to need, let's see. Oh, the coarse salt. That's right here. I use the coarse kosher salt. Morton is the most famous brand, I guess, or recognizable brand, but all the stores have their own brand of it as well, I believe. Why Martha Stewart says use coarse salt, I don't know. I think maybe it's better. It works for this recipe, and you'll find out later why. And then you'll also use about, the recipe calls for 3/4 of a cup of extra virgin olive oil. I have yet to use that much olive oil in this recipe, but that's what it says. And depending on what your weather is like I said in one of our previous episodes, I think it was the salsa episode, we don't have air conditioning and we just have wall gas heaters. So everything that I bake is at the mercy of my environment. So sometimes when I mix up this sponge that I'm making right now, it'll be really like liquidy. But tonight, we're getting a pretty good soft dough here. And then when you get it all mixed up, you don't see any more flour. You're going to get just a nice scraper. And you're going to scrape down your sides real good. Make a nice little mound in the middle of your bowl. And then we're going to use a 2-layer covering. I do that again because I'm at the mercy of my environment. If you have a nice controlled environment that you work in for cooking, you can just do what the recipe says, which is cover it with plastic wrap. We're sealing off all the moisture so that way we can make this grow and get all bubbly and spongy, because that's what's going to make it be a really tasty bread. With this big bowl, I have to use like 2 layers of it because it's not wide enough. This is one of the reasons why I hate plastic wrap, because it doesn't come out good. I need to do like how the school has those big giant ones that sit on the counter and then you just pull it out and whoosh, cut it off. Those are great. Best invention ever. If you don't work in a school kitchen and you don't know what I'm talking about, that is a bummer for you. Okay, so this is what I'm talking about, the double layer. So we've got our layer of plastic wrap that'll help seal in the moisture, and then, again, because I'm at the mercy of my environments, I put another towel on it to keep it nice and warm. And then I just set it on the stove, because that seems to be the warmest spot in my house all the time. Move this out of the way. Bryce is cooking supper for us right now, so our space is limited. And then I'll see you in about 2 hours. All right, 2 hours later, and we have a nice, fluffy, gooey thing of sponge. So now what we do, this next part, you add your salt. So it's 2 tablespoons of the coarse salt. So it's the bigger grains of salt. Like I said, the Morton's, I think they got store brands of it too. And you just kind of sprinkle that all over the top of your sponge. You use your trusty spoon, and you have an arm workout. Because it doesn't want to stir. It's nice and gooey, sticking to the edges, sticking to your spoon. You have no idea if you're actually mixing the salt up into all the crevices, but you just keep going. Again, this recipe had it going using a dough hook on a standing mixer. I'm like, why waste the arm exercises? When you think you got it good and mixed, you're going to scrape your bowl down again. And you're done with your spoon at this point, so you can scrape it off real good. Put it in your sink to soak, because that dough doesn't like to come off very well. And also, at this time, if you have a bowl scraper, this is a phenomenal piece of equipment right here. You're going to want to invest in one. Mine was a cheap one that I got like way back my first year of marriage, and Cooking Club of America was a free gift, and it's broken, but I hold it together and it still works just fine. So now what we're going to do, once we have our salt mixed in, we are going to put some flour on our working surface. This is a butcher block that I use. Works pretty well. You're going to scrape down all your sides off your bowl. This is very gooey, and it's going to seem very messy, and you're going to think this is just wrong. This can't be right. It's right. Believe me. Trust me. You're just going to scrape your whole bowl down and let it just ooze out onto this pile of flour that you got on your counter. And like I said, super, super gooey. You're going to want to put a little, it's going to start oozing. Put a little flour around the edges. You're going to put a little flour in your bowl. Tap it all around. Then, this is the fun part. You're going to do all 4 sides, and you're just going to fold. No kneading, you fold. So I start with the top. Lift it up with my dough scraper, bowl scraper, flip it over. Give it a cute little pat. Then we do the other side. Then you do the ends. When you're patting, what you're doing is you're like patting off the extra flour. So the outside's going to be nice, and you should be able to touch it at this point. But if you get through to the inside of the dough, it's going to be real sticky. Then you put it, the seam sides down, the seams down in your bowl. Cover it back up with that plastic wrap. And I use my towel again to keep the insulation and make it nice and warm and moist. And then 1 more hour. Okay, and then after that other hour, you are going to repeat. So you're going to see your dough, and it should have risen up again. Nice and fluffy. Have your floured surface. Scrape it out with your trusty bowl scraper. If you don't have a bowl scraper, one of those big plastic scrapers works too, but bowl scraper just contours with the edge of the bowl really well. And you get it out really good. Put a little bit more flour in your bowl. Pat it around. And then do your folds just like before. Since they kind of spread out like this, I'm going to do my sides first. Sometimes it sticks to the counter, so you got to kind of pry it off. That's what your scraper's for. Got my seams all on the top. Pick it up. Flop it in. And 1 more hour of raising. Okay, so we're getting ready to start baking now. So after that last hour, and actually Bryce pointed out that I told you the wrong time at the beginning. Total from start to finish, it's going to be about 4.5 hours for this. So this is a good afternoon project when you have other things to do. You can whip it up, let it sit for the 2 hours and go do something else. Fold it, let it sit for an hour, go do something else. Fold it again, let it sit for an hour, go do something else. And now we're at this step. So we're going to get a big sheet. It's one of these big cookie sheets. I'm not quite sure of the size. I think it says in here 17 by 12. And what we do is we spray it with some cooking spray. And then we line it with parchment paper. And this is just so it's easier to clean up the pan. And then this is where the extra virgin olive oil comes into play. The recipe that I have calls for about 3/4 cup. I don't actually use that much. I start with 1/4 cup. And you just coat the bottom of your parchment paper with that 1/4 cup. Then you take your dough, you're going to use your bowl scraper. I accidentally put mine in the sink already, so I got to use my hands. And you're going to plop it right on top of your oil that you just spread in your pan. This is such a good dough, it just kind of plops right out of your pan, your mixing bowl, real nice. It's going to be all bubbly. If you can see right here, I've got a nice big air bubble, that's fun. And then I fill my 1/4 cup back up. You're going to want to get your hands pretty oily. You have it on here, you pick it up, and you flip it over. Then you use that piece of plastic wrap that you've been using this whole time, put it on, spread it out. Doesn't have to be perfectly at this point. And now, we're just going to let it sit here and rest for about 10 minutes. And then we'll be back to finish it up. Okay, so it rested. Now we're going to smash it all out and just get it as best as you can to all the corners. Try to keep it as even as possible from the middle. Then you peel off your plastic wrap. You can play with your dough a little bit. Sometimes the olive oil from the bottom likes to pool in the corners, so sometimes I lift up the corners and let it sink back underneath. The olive oil in here is going to give it its crispy crust because you're going to bake it at 450. At this time you're going to want to make sure you're getting your oven preheated. We're going to drizzle a little more olive oil on the top, however much you like. And then we're going to take some more of that coarse salt and we're just going to sprinkle it all over the top. Real light coating. That is my oven preheated. So now we're going to stick it in the oven. It's going to cook for a total of 25 to 30 minutes, and we're going to stop it halfway in to rotate our pan. So I'm going to go ahead and put it in the oven now for the first, I go 13 and 12 is what I usually do, and that usually makes for a perfect bake. But every oven is different, so that's why they give you that leeway. Okay, so the 25 minutes is up, so I'm going to check and see if this is done. More than likely it will be. It's going to be nice and golden brown, and be careful when you open it. 450-degree oven, super hot, burn your eyebrows. Golden brown. It's perfect. So then I have a cooling rack underneath here, and we're going to get it off of here so it can cool. You're going to have some extra olive oil in your thing, so you're just going to drizzle it on the top. Except for my pan's hot, so I need to use 2 of these. If you're watching your oil intake, you don't have to use this extra oil, but it does help with the crispiness. Now this bread is a nice chewy bread with a nice crispy outer edge. When it's fresh like this, you'll let it cool for like an hour or 2, and then you can just start slicing it up. And you can slice it in squares and use it for sandwiches. You can slice it in half the horizontal way and use it as flatbread pizza, which is Bryce's favorite way now. If you do it in sandwiches, use fresh tomatoes and fresh mozzarella and a basil leaf. Drizzle it with a little more olive oil just because it's tasty, and that's a really yummy sandwich too. It's one of our summer favorites. But this was my focaccia bread. We'll post the abbreviated recipe in the comments below. Thank you. Have a good night.